I don't know how many hours I sat in the poorly lit room trying to explain that I wasn't a murderer. The officers tried to appear kind by offering snacks or coffee in exchange for me telling them everything. I hadn't slept for at least 2 days and my head had started to pound. I pleaded again, my hands straining at the cuffs that kept them together. I told you again and again that I didn't know the victim and that I didn't know the group I met with beforehand. I saw some of their posts on a thread discussing mutual interests and saw that they were local, I said, my voice sounding as tired as it felt. A message board for people who are into ghosts, right? Listen, you had no blood on your hands, but you were picked up at the location of a mutilated dead body. If it was the others who killed him, why won't you tell us? Did they pick him out for a reason, maybe because of his name? Stan Smith. Stan is a good name, you know. I named my son that, the detective said, and then trailed off for a second before getting back on topic. With everyone we found, it looked like you guys were doing a ritual, he said, nerves also getting to him. I'd been speaking with this man for hours. His partner left the room for a break and I had hoped that I could get through to him in some way. He said that his name was Baus. I found myself rubbing my temple trying to keep a migraine away. We were doing a ritual, the one that went horribly wrong. I never should have met up with those people. I just wanted to have a fun time over the weekend. I assumed the group wanted to party, but they were all really into some kind of mystic activities. I figured to get to the fun stuff that I would have to show them a fun little party trick. My head ached away. I should have called my lawyer, but he would have just made this whole thing worse. You won't believe me, but what happened to that man was an accident, I started. Baus leaned in, which put me on guard. He was expecting me to finally admit to a reasonable explanation of why a man was dead when there wasn't one. We were doing a ritual, summoning Satan and other demons. It's pretty easy, you know. They want to be summoned, so they don't make it that hard. In fact, you can find most of the materials to do so in any household cupboard. I rambled on, hoping to keep his attention. Baus leaned back on his chair, disappointed. The hard plastic chairs caused him as much pain as myself. Whoever designed this room did a good job. The cold gray walls felt as if they were closing in. The other man didn't believe what I was saying but didn't ask for me to stop talking. He was hoping that I might slip up and say something useful if I went on. But it is easy to get the summoning wrong. A simple mistake in common ingredients or a slip of the tongue would be enough to cause accidents. I needed to stop. My mind flashed back to what happened that night. My entire body turned to cold by the memory. It should have been a simple summoning. I wanted to bring forth a lesser demon that only wanted to have fun instead of taking your soul. But somebody got cocky and pushed me aside, trying to bring forth Satan instead. By the time that I recovered, he already said the words causing our downfall and killing an innocent man. We didn't have enough power in the summoning for such a powerful request, so yeah, we got Stan instead. At least most of him. The bad coffee and chips from the vending machine turned my stomach. I needed to cover my mouth to keep it all down. I don't believe in that stuff, you know, seeing and believing and all that, Baus said, crossing his arms over his chest. I wanted to be mad at him but felt too tired to do so. He looked exhausted and frustrated. I almost felt bad for him. He was stuck in a room with a person making crazy claims. I don't blame him for not believing me. Unless you were in the know with magic, it wasn't something people accepted lightly. This guy just wanted to go home to his bed and his family. I looked at the brickwork, trying to think of some way out of this. I needed a lie that would pin the blame on others but also stand up in court. And then an idea came to me. My attention went back to Baus so quickly that he moved back in his chair slightly. If I showed you, would you believe me? I asked, voice shaking. What do you mean? He asked slowly. I needed to steady my hands. A ball of excitement had started to form in my stomach and I pushed it down. This might just work out for me after all. If we did a ritual, if I showed you how magic works, would you believe me? I offered, pinning all my hopes on that single suggestion. He frowned, shaking his head, but I saw a hint of acceptance towards the idea. He didn't want to believe what I said was true, but he wanted to prove I was crazy by letting me fail a ritual. If it doesn't work, I'll say whatever you want me to. I'll sign any statement, I don't care. I'll just need a few things, all of which are harmless. So, what do you say? I asked, leaning forward. He didn't like the crazy look in my eye, but couldn't pass up easily on closing the case. He shrugged and told me to write down what we needed. Most of the things were already at the police station, but he might need to go to a grocery store for a handful of items. But there were a few that stayed open all night. With the written list, he left me alone, saying that he would be back shortly. I suppressed a smile. I finally had a way out. What most people don't understand is that Satan isn't really a bad guy. He's evil yet reasonable. I've never personally spoken with the big guy, but I knew a person who did. In exchange for his soul, my mentor became successful in any field that he worked in. He knew that he would go to hell at the end of his life, but became smitten with the devil himself, and he almost looked forward to the idea. I could easily summon him and make a deal for my freedom. It wasn't as if I would be going to heaven anyway. I didn't save myself for marriage and a bunch of other little sins a certain other big guy would frown upon. I wondered if Baus might become collateral damage. That would suck. I didn't overly dislike the guy, he was only doing his job. Baus came back sooner than expected with the requested items in hand along with a notepad to write down my confession. He was positive that I would be making one. I wanted to tell him that this wasn't going to turn out well for him, but I decided against it. I looked over at what he had brought along, surprised by how fast he had gotten the items. I took him from the shared kitchen, it was all there. He said, standing in the corner of the room. I pushed aside the table to make room for the circle of salt in the middle of the floor. The cuffs made the process uncomfortable, but I pushed through. Soon I would be a free man walking out of this room. Baus watched from the corner, making it clear that he thought I was crazy. I stayed on my knees, saying what words I needed to be careful to not make any slip-ups. With complex summoning words, it was easy to make a single deadly mistake. Aside from the tongue twisters, the rest of the setup was easy. Some salt here, some offers there, and a drop of blood I got from biting my finger. I knew what was coming, so I stayed on the ground. The lights overhead started to darken as I spoke, causing the other man to start in doubt what he was seeing. Soon the ground under us had rumbled as heat started to flood the room. I felt the sweat start on my forehead. A pole came between my chest and the circle in the ground. Something was wrong. This whole thing was off, but I couldn't figure out why that might be. I had used the right materials and said the right words. What could be wrong? I refused to stop, finishing up what I needed to say, and I waited with a held breath. The rumbling stopped and the lights came back on, and nothing else happened for a second, making me think that I failed. When what I summoned appeared in the middle of the circle, I knew I failed, but in a way that I never wanted to see it again. A body appeared a few inches above the circle and dropped down hard on the cement floor. I gasped, head dizzy at the sight and smell of what was in front of us. Unlike the poor Stan whom we had killed through our careless actions, this body looked far too small. At first I prayed that it was an animal. After I saw a bloody leg wearing a footy pajama sticking out from the twisted wreckage, I knew what had happened. I wanted to be sick. My mind internally screamed at the horror of what I had just done. But this should not have happened. I collapsed, my face breaking the circle. In the middle of my panic and dread, I tasted something sweet. The realization of how this mistake happened caused me to sit up. I stared at the box and poured the salt from. The blank box. one that could have easily held sugar if no one thought to check what somebody repacked inside of it. My head slowly turned, my eyes landing on the other man in the room. His eyes were so wide that I thought they might pop out. A weight came down on my stomach when another realization came. Baus recognized a detail about this body. It took every ounce of power to ask a very simple question. "What did you say your son's name was?" I said, voice very weak. Baus looked down in my direction slowly. His mouth opened for a scream that never came. In fact, he never made another sound again. The sight was enough to make his mind snap. I faintly thought that I heard a deep, dark laugh. It might have been my imagination, but I would like to think the big guy saw this as hilarious. Regardless of making a deal with him, I was always destined to spend the rest of eternity under his thumb. And honestly, I deserved it.